More disturbing details. Bryan Kohberger, victim's father, reveals some disturbing new details ahead of sentencing. So on July 18th, Steve Gonsalves, father of slain University of Idaho student Kaylee Gonsalves, shared some harrowing new details about his daughter's final moments in an interview with News Nation. He disclosed that Kaylee, one of the four victims brutally murdered by Bryan Kohberger in November of 2022, suffered injuries suggesting her killer attempted to silence her during the attack. Now, according to the Latah County coroner, Kathy Mabbitt, Kaylee's wounds indicated an effort to gag her while she was stabbed to death. These revelations come as the Gonsalves family prepares to deliver victim impact statements at Kohberger's sentencing, which is set for July 23rd. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the case, Kohberger, a former criminology PhD student, confessed to the murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin on July 2nd of 2025 as part of a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty. He will, however, receive 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders and a 10-year sentence for burglary on top of those consecutive life sentences, with no right to ask for any type of an appeal. But of course, unless the court gave an illegal sentence, which the court isn't because its hands are tied as it relates to what can be done, that would be the only thing you could appeal anyway. And an illegal sentence can be corrected at any time. You don't have to appeal. So don't worry about it. He's not going to be able to appeal. We talked about this on Friday's show last week. Don't worry about it. He's not going to appeal anything. I promise you that. So the plea deal, which canceled a trial which was set to begin in early August, has sparked outrage among some victims' family, particularly the Gonsalves, who feel excluded from the process and quite frustrated by the ongoing secrecy surrounding this case. I agree. So Steve Gonsalves expressed deep frustration over the lack of transparency, noting that the family has been denied critical details about the murders, such as the number of times that Kaylee was stabbed or whether she was choked. He emphasized the need for these facts to craft meaningful victim impact statements, stating, "We're writing our victim impact statements and we don't even know what the impact, as they hid the impact from all of us." Now, the family's anger has only intensified when the gag order in place since early in this case was lifted on July 17th, but the court refused to unseal all the records, citing the need for a thorough review post-sentencing. Now, these murders occurred in the early hours of November 13th of 2022, when Kohberger broke into the student's rental home there in Moscow, Idaho, and stabbed the 4 victims. Evidence suggests that he planned the attack, purchasing a K-bar knife months earlier, and frequently visiting the area, and his phone is actually pinged near the victim's home some 23 times between July and November of 2022. Now, while Kohberger left a knife sheath with his DNA at the scene, leading to his arrest, his motives remain undisclosed, and no known connection to the victims has been established. So let me tell you what I'm thinking about this. Unveiling the full details of this heinous crime, like the Idaho murders, is critical not only for the victims' families, but also for society's broader understanding of evil and the consciousness behind such acts. Transparency in cases of this magnitude serve multiple purposes. First, it honors the victims by ensuring their stories are told accurately and completely, allowing families like the Gonsalves to process their grief and advocate effectiveness in court, and withholding details, as Steve Gonsalves has noted, risks protecting the perpetrator and denying closure to those most affected. But here, understanding the specifics of such crimes, motives, methods, and psychology profiles of this perpetrator enables criminalists, psychologists, and law enforcement to better comprehend the nature of the violent behavior. Now, Kohberger, a criminology student with knowledge of crime scene analysis, presents a unique case study, right? His actions suggest a calculated approach, yet the absence of a clear motive leaves a gap in understanding why such atrocities occur. Now, public access to these details can inform preventative measures, improve profiling techniques, and enhance community safety protocols. And once again, transparency fosters public trust in the judicial system. The secrecy surrounding Kohberger's case, including the prolonged gag order and sealed records, has done nothing but fuel frustration and skepticism among the victim's family and the public. By openly addressing the ugliness of these crimes, as Steve Gonsalves has urged, society can confront the reality of evil, destigmatizing discussions about the violent crime and encouraging collective efforts to prevent future tragedies. Only through a full reckoning with the facts can we hope to understand the consciousness behind such acts and the work toward a safer, more informed world when it comes to legal affairs. Now, the president has actually chimed in as it relates to this case, saying that somehow the judge should require Kohberger to give kind of his statement in allocution, which he doesn't have to make, but he could. And he gets kind of the last word, but he's not required to say anything at sentencing. My guess is he's pretty much a coward, and I don't think he'll say a word. I don't think he's going to say he's sorry. I don't think he's going to give a motive at all. I think this is part of his little cat and mouse game that we are seeing. All right. But here's the important thing, and this has been my frustration, is you can seat a jury. Just because a jury knows about the case doesn't mean that they can't be fair and impartial on the case. They just have to be able to set those matters aside, what they know about it, and make their decision based upon the evidence that's presented in court or the lack of evidence. But when we're talking about a case that involves the death penalty, the ultimate punishment, the public should know, right? If 4 murders by brutally stabbing somebody isn't enough to warrant the death penalty, then what is? All right. And on top of that, if he in fact went in there and butchered, as we often suspect that he did, these 4 people, as he stabbed them repeatedly, but we don't know all those facts, maybe that should have required the death penalty. Maybe the prosecutor made the wrong decision by not going after the death penalty. Maybe if it wasn't as bad as we suspect, maybe there's a possibility that the prosecutor made the right call and made the appropriate plea deal to take the death penalty off the table. We've talked about this. This prosecutor's never prosecuted a case that has gone to a death penalty. I think one, I take that back, where it was ultimately, I think, reversed on appeal. So the people need to know. The people need to understand the seriousness, the heinousness, and if pure evil exists, then yes, it may require the ultimate punishment. The only way we can do that is if we get to the facts. So I appreciate the courts trying to be all touchy-feely and respect people. I get that. But we're adults. And people that want to know what's going on in their world should be allowed to have this information. And if you don't want to look at it, you don't have to. But the world is an ugly place, ladies and gentlemen. It is an ugly place. And the only thing that is truly shocking is the terrible things that other human beings can do to others. And when you realize how mean and cruel and disgusting other human beings can be to another, that's when you realize that maybe, just maybe, there's some people that require the ultimate punishment.
And the big news of the day, obviously, was the sentencing in the case for Bryan Kohberger. Now, I'm not going to go through every little detail. If you want to watch it, it was about, I think, an hour and 45 minutes with a 10-minute break in there. Frankly, that's about an appropriate time period. There was decorum, a little bit of clapping at some point, but the judge didn't shut anybody down, nor the defense object. But the first thing I thought was interesting, the judge did what most judges do at a sentencing like this. There was no pre-sentence investigation report because the defendant waived it. And frankly, it didn't matter because everybody knows he's going to get the sentence of life without the possibility of parole, 4 consecutive life sentences, plus another 10 years on top of that. But the judge did something so that Bryan Kohberger will never profit off of this case, and I commend him for that. So first, what did the court do? The court asked, was there any legal cause why this sentencing should not go forward, and should the sentence not be imposed for all the people who swear up and down that Bryan Kohberger is somehow innocent, that his attorneys beat him into submission, and he didn't do these crimes? Well, guess what? He did not jump up and say, Judge, this matter should not go forward because I am innocent. He didn't say that, ladies and gentlemen. So for all the people that want to deny reality, it's done. It's finished. It's over. Okay? He pled guilty, and today he got sentenced for that. So first, we had people went kind of in the order of the charges. So the victims of the burglary were Bethany Funk, and the victim impact statement was basically she was, she kind of explained why, she did what she did. Well, guess what? She was sick. She had a toothache. She called her dad, who was a doctor, said, take some, medication, kind of slept it off, so to speak. And she talks about the survivor's guilt. Okay. And you see through that victim impact statement, the effects on a serious crime of violence. She talks about how for the first year she had to sleep with her parents. She still locks the doors and double checks them, checks the rooms every night, and really hasn't had a good night sleep. But she's come to the conclusion that she wants to keep living for her friends. And that's a good thing. The judge commended her for that. Then we got Dylan Markinson and Madison Mogen's stepfather, Scott Laramie, spoke as well. Next, we had Madison Mogen's stepfather, Scott Laramie. Just very heartfelt sentencing statement that he gave. This is a young daughter that he's raised since she was 2, and really his heart was broken. And the grandmother of Madison Mogen also spoke, Kim Cheerley, who's a very good speaker for the circumstances, and she wanted to thank everybody, which I thought was very the way she did about it. It was very, very good. But then she also called out Bryan Kohberger, not by name. Very few times was the name Kohberger ever mentioned at all, but kind of said, hey, you got to watch your back, right? And then Ben Mogen, Madison's father. Now, he sounds like he's had some issues in life. He says he's dealt with addiction and things like that. And I would guess by some of his statements that he's done a little prison time, because he said, you're going to have to look around for the rest of your life, that someone may want to pull his card. That means somebody's going to take him out in prison. It was almost like a call to action in a nice way, so to speak. But I felt so bad for him because he acknowledged that the Laramie family had, basically raised his daughter. He appreciated all that. And it was rather moving. It was very, very emotional. I don't think there was a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge got emotional. The prosecutor got emotional. The only person that didn't get emotional at all was Bryan Kohberger. And then we thought there was going to maybe be some fireworks. You never know, right? Then the Gonsalves stepped up, Steve Gonsalves. He basically said, hey, you know what? We finished what you started. And guess what? You are going to prison for the rest of your life. And basically that that Bryan Kohberger united the community, the police, everybody because of him. And then it started, ladies and gentlemen, where Stephen Gonsalves started calling him out and saying, you know what, Mr. Kohberger, you're stupid. You think you're smarter than everybody else, but you got caught. And you're a joke. And, basically, you're a loser. That's the best way to describe it. I think that was actually what he said. But then Olivia Gonsalves, the older sister, got up and spoke. And she was good. She was good. And as well as Christy Gonsalves. And, we may put a couple of snippets in for this, but basically said, Bryan Kohberger, once again, you're a loser. You had no job. You couldn't get a job. You had no friends. You were pathetic. And you had to go creeping around at night in somebody else's apartment because you couldn't get the emotional affection or touch that you need because you are a loser. It was very impactful. And when she was done, there was clapping in the courtroom. And nobody said, maintain the decorum or anything like that. Frankly, it was appropriate. Then the attorney for the Gonsalves family read a couple of statements, one for Mrs. Gonsalves' mother, for the mother who couldn't read that. But, basically, then we moved on to Xana Kernodle's family. And yes, the aunt got up and was great. And she wanted answers. And she's like, hey, listen, I won't judge, but I'd love to know what the heck was going on. Randy Davis, the stepfather of Xana, got up and talked once again how everyone was united. Karen Norton, Xana's mother, same type of situation. Then the prosecutor got up and made a sentencing statement, explained that, we were ready and willing to go. But basically, the defense had said from the beginning that they were going to trial, that their client was factually innocent. And then they came in basically with their hat in hand and said, please, 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 could we have a plea bargain, life without the possibility of parole? It was the defense that went forward with that plea disposition. And understand, ladies and gentlemen, the defense was not going to go forward to the prosecution unless they had authority or permission from their client, Bryan Kohberger, to do that. And then the judge called Kohberger a coward and said, you're incompetent. And that is what had to sting. Just like when Olivia Gonzalez got up there and said, you're not smart. You're not the genius that you think you are. You're a coward and you're incompetent and you're a loser. That had to have stung Bryan Kohberger worse than anything, because he does think that he is smarter than everybody else and he's just going to sit there. But the reality of it is he thought he was going to get away with something, and the reality of it, he didn't, because he failed in his quest for this perfect crime. And like I said, so the judge said, you're incompetent, you're a coward, and incompetent. And he's basically, he's evil, and he doesn't want anybody to basically, he would like in his world not to have anybody want to talk to Bryan Kohberger ever again. And, he said the most serious, the hardest thing for anybody is having to bury a child. Could not imagine having to do that. That's just not the way it's supposed to work, right? The parents are supposed to go first. But he praised the family for their courage and their resilience and surviving roommates. And he said to have to go through with these crazy theories that people came up with that didn't know anything about it, and literally torture these young ladies, as the judge called them, crazy theories. And he hopes that they obviously shed the label of a victim. And I agree, they should not let this define them. They are more than this. They're survivors, they are fighters, and they are witnesses in a very serious case. And they should be very proud of them going forward. The judge said, hey, but we do know, we are certain who did it. We may not actually ever know why. And he says, don't ask why, because you can't explain these types of things. And if you go asking why, guess what? You make him relevant. Now, guess what? We'd all like to know why. We'd like to study it. We'd like to know what happened in this particular situation. But he hopes that basically people will not, do a book deal or want to interview him or something along those lines, because there's no rationality to this at all. He understands people are going to study it, but he says, I hope you do it quietly. And don't make this guy famous. So the judge said, guess what, Mr. Kohberger? Your end of your 15 minutes of fame is here. You are going to be perpetually incarcerated for the rest of your life. He cited a trial judge in Idaho. Apparently a judge by the name of Edward Lodge. Apparently he was on the bench for some 50 years, so he probably had seen it all. And he said he always tried to say that he'd like to try to find something good about a particular defendant. Sometimes he said it was tough to do that. He said one time he even said, well, the only thing I could come up with was the defendant had, guess what? Some really nice handwriting. That was about it. But the judge says, you know what? No, I'm not going to say anything good about you, because there's nothing good to say about Bryan Kohberger. He's shown no remorse, no redemption whatsoever, and he forever needs to be removed from society. And then the court went through all of the counts for the actual imposition of sentencing. Count 1, burglary, 10 years, 0 to indeterminate. And what did he do? Imposed a fine of $50,000. And I'll explain in a minute why that's significant. Count 2, Madison Mogan, life, no possibility of parole. $50,000 fine, $5,000 civil restitution. Count 3, Kaylee Gonzalez, life, consecutive to counts 1 and 2, life without the possibility of parole with $50,000 fine, civil penalty $5,000. Count 4, xanacronodal, life without the parole, consecutive to any other count, $50,000 fine, plus $5,000 in civil restitution. Count 5, Ethan Chapin, life without the possibility of parole, $50,000 fine, $5,000 civil judgment. You may say, what's the good of that, Scott? What does that matter? Well, it matters because guess what? If people put money on his books, that money is going to go towards that fine, paying restitution as well. Okay. If he ever profits any money from any book deals or movie, or anything along those lines, guess what? All that money, it's not going to go to him. It's going to go to the state. It's going to go to the families, at least on the $5,000 portion of it. So you have 50, 100, 150, 250 in fines, $250,000 in fine. And maybe he'll get to work and make 8 cents a day or something along those lines. The point is, the judge wanted to make his life miserable so that he doesn't get money on his books. He'll get to keep a little, but most of it will go towards restitution. Like I said, all counts were consecutive. Restitution, they're going to reserve that for 60 days. But usually that will include any costs of prosecution that they may be entitled to for the state to get a bill, at least on the books, they'll never pay. And also, he's ordered to take a DNA sample, and he is referred to or sent to the custody of the Idaho Board of Corrections. The judge did advise him you can appeal, but he said, you may want to talk to your attorneys to do that because that could void your deal. So yes, it is over, ladies and gentlemen. Bryan Kohberger sentenced finally. Yes, I think we would all like to know why. And I kind of like Judge Hippler's thinking. Maybe if we don't know why, because it makes him irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, he is a coward. He is a loser. And now he's a convicted murderer, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And I'm sure there'll be some desperate person out there that will want to date him or send him money or something along those lines. But the reality of it is, just like the family said and the judge said, he's a loser. He's not smart. He's incompetent. We'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think in the comments. So finally, just saying, this was a perfect demonstration of a victim impact sentencing. And I've been a lot of these where you're not going to say anything because you're going to appeal. But Kohberger didn't say anything. He didn't have the guts to get up and say, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. The words I'm sorry can go a long way, but he didn't even do that. The defense said nothing. I get it. They just want to get in and out. They figure, let everybody sit here and say what an evil person he is, but we're out of here. We got him life. That's what our goal was from the beginning, and all that other stuff about factual innocence. And they were going to proceed to trial. It was just puffery. It was just gamesmanship. And frankly, for all those out there who think he's innocent people don't plead guilty to 4 counts of murder. They don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. Just think about that.
And our story has to deal with the new details regarding the brutality of Bryan Kohberger. Now, we've heard rumors and we've heard, anecdotal stories that may have been accurate, but now we are getting actual police reports that are being released, and it is going to be a treasure trove of information as it relates to the brutality of Bryan Kohberger and why he never wanted to go to a jury trial. He tried to bluff everybody, and as you may recall, all the motions hearings were, we didn't get this in discovery. Dismiss the death penalty. We can't do this, Judge. Dismiss the death penalty. They knew all along that if these facts and these photographs got in front of a jury, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have been not only found guilty, but he would have been sentenced to death. Now, Bryan Kohberger is probably sitting there after watching the sentencing hearing yesterday. And yes, people tried to mock him and criticize him because he deserved it. That's true. He is a coward. He is a failure when it came to committing crime. He was a failure at life. He was a failure at relationships with women. And clearly, he has some issues when it comes to women. And hopefully someone's going to help him work through that violent tendency towards women in the Department of Corrections there in Idaho. So like I said, he never wanted to go to a jury. He knew he would be found guilty. And he's probably sitting there thinking, once you all find out how bad I am, you are going to be shocked and he's going to say, and I got life without parole. I bet you he's thinking he won. The Moscow Police Department has released hundreds of previously marked confidential documents from its investigation into the 4 University of Idaho students. Now, numerous police statements describe arriving at the home on King Road, where they found the bodies of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. One officer said, "I was unable to comprehend exactly what I was looking at while trying to discern the nature of the injuries." One of the friends outside described going over to the house with another friend after the surviving roommates called them, saying something was not right. That friend went up the stairs to Xana's room on the second floor. Chapin and Kernodle were found in Kernodle's bedroom. The friend told police the door was partially open, and when he went in, he thought the mess was from a drunken night out. The splatter that he saw across her bedroom was actually dried blood. That's when he told the roommates who survived, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen, to get out of the house and call 911. Next, he grabbed a knife from a kitchen drawer and checked Kernodle's closet to make sure that there was no one else there. He checked their pulses, but both of their bodies had rigor mortis and were cold to the touch with no breath or pulse, according to the reports. Now, Kernodle, who was lying on her back, was covered in numerous wounds across her arms, hands, and face, according to the report, and her boyfriend, Chapin, was still lying in bed with a blanket pulled across him. Investigators noticed that there were 2 large cuts on the back of his legs, which were deep into the tissue. On the 3rd floor of the home, Gonzalez and Mogen were in the same bed in Mogen's room. Mogen had a wound on her face and wounds on her upper body, according to the reports. And in several police accounts, officers described the wounds to Gonzalez's face and upper body as so extreme that they made her unrecognizable. Gonzalez's family told reporters that she had been stabbed 34 times. Now, Chapin was killed by a stab wound to the neck that severed his jugular vein, as well as an artery. Now, Kernodle died from lacerations to her heart and lungs, and she had been stabbed more than 50 times. Most of her wounds were defensive, the medical examiner said, because she was trying to fight the killer. Now, Mogen's fatal injuries were lacerations to her liver and her left lung. And Mogen, Kernodle, and Chapin had only sharp force wounds, according to the reports that have been released. Now, Gonzalez had a sharp and blunt force injuries, according to the report, and had fatal injuries, including a lung laceration, a liver laceration, and severed subclavian vein and artery. Now, the police report said the medical examiner noted that the weapon was single-edged, very sharp, and said a lot of force was used by this suspect. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why Bryan Kohberger never wanted to go in front of a jury. Okay, we're not talking one time or, stabbed somebody, hit an artery, somebody bled out by accident almost, right? That's second-degree murder. But we're talking stabbed 30 to 50 times, fighting against somebody who is defending herself, or in cold blood kill somebody who's just sleeping. Ladies and gentlemen, if that's not worthy of the death penalty, what is? Is it 1 murder, 2, 3, 4 murders? Let me know what you think, but the brutality is going to come back. And I just hope Kohberger's not in there laughing, thinking he basically got away with it with avoiding the death penalty. Let's talk quickly about the sentencing hearing. Now, you got to love the tact taken by the Gonzalez family. It was wonderful. Kohberger has the psychological makeup of a serial killer, which means that he is both incredibly insecure and has a massive ego. He'd be completely unmoved by emotional victim impact statements, and they absolutely have a place and felt right for those who made them at the time. But pointing out his failures with women, his failures in life, his failures when it came to committing the crime, that was brilliance. The judge did it as well. What made it all more effective was the fact that the most devastating statement was made by a female, clearly the object of his hate. Truly believed that there was some twisted little thing that he has against women, and that's why these murders occurred. Now, we may never know, but I don't think I'm wrong in that particular statement. Now, Hitler ran a very good courtroom, and to see this judge, who's been on the bench for many years, get choked up, that means it was powerful. to everyone in the courtroom. And once again, we did not even see the pictures of the scene. But think about it, 30 times stabbing somebody, 50 times killing somebody in their sleep by getting them in their neck. That would have warranted the death penalty, and Kohberger knew it would. His attorneys knew that it would. Now, obviously, nobody can force Bryan Kohberger to make a statement at allocution if he chose to do so. He respectfully declined. But he's been not respectful in any sense of the word. He's exercised his constitutional rights, and he's entitled to do so. But he definitely didn't deserve any kudos at all from the judge, and I think the judge was right in saying he deserved nothing, and there was nothing good to say about them. But one more thing I want to talk about was we've only just scratched the surface of the investigation, but what I think we're going to see is that this was so thorough. Okay, all the people with some of these crazy theories out there, you're going to see that those were completely eliminated. And it also shows why the defense's theory of this alternate suspect went down in flames, crashed and burned. It wasn't pretty at all for the defense because the prosecution could show everything that they did to eliminate anybody else being involved other than Bryan Kohberger. The efforts that they went to chase down where the knife could have possibly been dumped, soil samples, right? Their attempts to connect Kohberger to the Papa Roger, which turned out not to be him at all. They knew who it was. Their inability to find a connection was no surprise, and we have seen plenty of indication that this case from the filing and by both of the defense hearings that he was the only suspect. We've talked about the Papa Rogers issues. Frankly, we didn't know, right? Now we absolutely know that Kohberger was not the owner of that account, and we may never know that person's particular identity. Anyway, these police reports today paint a picture of violence that was far beyond what most people would have expected to see and far beyond what most people are normally exposed to. Now, does it shock me? No, I've been doing this for decades, right? 33 decades. Been doing this type of stuff, handled several stabbing cases, and they are by far some of the worst. And it's kind of like strangulation, right? It is intentional and stabbing somebody, not once, not twice, 3, 4, 50 times, ladies and gentlemen, over and over and over again. How is that not with malice aforethought and after deliberation? No way possible. That is nothing but pure anger. Like I said, xanocronodal, 50 times stabbed. Can you say overkill? We're talking about a K-bar. A K-bar, ladies and gentlemen. Think about that. If I was at the CrimeTalk studios, I'd pull up my K-bar that I had since the summer of 1988. We also have a confirmation that Ethan suffered these deep cuts to his legs. Dateline had reported that, but this wasn't necessary to commit the crime. But it was apparently necessary for Kohberger to put his mark on him in some way for sure. And then obviously one major question that investigators and the state didn't answer was why they believe what the motive may have been. They had the benefit of talking to profilers, viewing Kohberger's search history, and getting inside his head through interviews with people who interacted with him. They absolutely have theories, even if they aren't necessarily going to be shared. I would have liked to have seen that as well. Hopefully these motions will be unsealed as time goes on, and we will get even more information on just how cruel and brutal Bryan Kohberger was. And I don't know, maybe he played everybody. Maybe it should have gone to trial. It's over now. It really doesn't matter. But as the judge said yesterday, Judge Hippler said, pure evil. Judges are always trying to find at least something good to say about a client. I've heard judges tell me that before. You can usually find something good to say about at least one client, about the client. Rarely had you ever had an opportunity where you couldn't say that. But this is the one. And guess what? Ann Taylor couldn't even come up with one good thing to say at sentencing yesterday. Not a one. Let that sink in for a second.